June 18, 2026. The sun has barely risen over Moscow, and a column of black smoke begins to rise 15 kilometers from Vladimir Putin's office. A refinery in flames. Again, the second time in the same week. And just look at the irony. Russia has, by far, the densest air defense ever built in history. Radars, missiles, automatic cannons, layer upon layer. Just to give you an idea of the paranoia, just around one of Putin's private residences, in a place called Valdai, Russia erected 7 new towers of an anti-aircraft system called Pantsir in a single day. There are 27 defense positions surrounding the man's house. And even with all that, something made of plastic and cheap electronics that costs less than an economy car got through Moscow's defenses and hit that refinery with meter-level precision. And seeing this, the question is inevitable. How? How is it that the most expensive defense on the planet is being breached by something so simple and cheap? The answer goes against everything we thought about how to protect a country. And it's not what it seems. First, you need to understand something. Despite what many believe, this wasn't luck. It wasn't a lost drone that just happened to pass by. It's a systematic campaign, repeated night after night, that grew at a speed no one predicted. Ukrainian drones today can cover 1,000, 2,000, and according to the Ukrainian command itself, as much as 3,500 kilometers. This puts practically all of the important parts of Russia within Kiev's reach. The refineries, the factories, the ammunition depots, everything. And the targets are not chosen by chance. They are refineries, fuel terminals, energy infrastructure, things that hit at the same time the Russian government's finances, the fuel that moves the army, and the average person's pocket. Today, in Russia, 1 out of every 4 gas stations already operates with some kind of sales restriction. The smoke rising behind Moscow isn't just fire, it's the Russian economy burning. This is especially humiliating. On the same day as this attack, Putin was hosting Southeast Asian leaders at a summit in another city, posing for photos. And he didn't say a word about the refinery burning in his own capital, as if nothing was happening. But to understand how the deck gets stacked, we need to start with a question that almost nobody asks. What was this Russian defense for? Because an anti-air defense isn't a magic wall that stops everything. It's a tool made for a specific job. And the job for which the Russian defense was designed was just one: to take down expensive, large, and scarce things. Think about the systems that make up this defense. The S-400, capable of detecting and attacking almost 100 targets at the same time, hundreds of kilometers away. Pantsir and Tor, made to protect closely against planes and missiles. All of this was built in a world where the enemy was a $100 million fighter jet, or a satellite-guided missile. Few targets, very valuable, flying high and fast. Against this enemy, Russia has set up the densest defense in the world. And it worked. The problem is that this enemy stopped showing up. Because Ukraine did something that no one expected. It didn't try to beat that defense at its own game. It changed the game. Instead of sending a few expensive targets, it started sending many cheap targets. Instead of million-dollar missiles, swarms of plastic drones that cost a few $1,000s each. Here's a number that changes everything. Ukraine has become a war economy entirely focused on mass-producing these drones. We're discussing millions of units annually. A single Ukrainian company alone produces about 200 long-range drones per day, and it says it can double or triple that quickly. And why does this matter so much? Because it changes the math of the war. When the drone costs less than a car, you can lose most of them and still come out ahead. If out of every 10 drones launched, only 1 reaches the target, and that target is a refinery, the math still works out. And it works out by a wide margin. Ukraine stopped trying to hit them all. It plays to make sure some always get through. and a defense built to take down expensive things one by one. It simply wasn't made for a sky full of cheap things coming from all directions. But then you might think, okay, there are a lot of them and they're cheap. But sending a lot of cheap stuff doesn't help at all if the satellite signal is blocked and the radar sees you coming from far away. Russia has invested heavily in electronic warfare for years, in blocking and spoofing navigation signals to blind and disorient any drone. So how do these cheap drones find their way? How does something like this, without a pilot, find a fuel tank 1,500 kilometers away? Is this where the story gets really impressive? Because Ukraine's response to the signal blockade was brutally simple. They thought, if Russia blocks the navigation signal, then let's make a drone that doesn't need that signal. Consider how big that turnaround is. For years, the way to take down a drone was to cut its signal. You'd blind the satellite and it would get lost. Ukraine simply eliminated that weakness. The newest long-range drones navigate using a layered system. First, inertial navigation, that tracks its movement independently without external signals. It's like your inner ear, which tells you which way you're turning even with your eyes closed. Then, and this is the brilliant part, a cheap night vision camera like this one films the ground below and compares it in real time with a satellite map that's already stored in the drone's memory. It locates itself by looking at the ground, not the sky. River, road, outline of a hill. The drone compares what it sees with what it has recorded and knows exactly where it is, without any satellite. And, in the final stretch, an AI turns on the camera, recognizes the shape of the target, and locks onto it by itself. The phrase that sums this up is almost a punchline. Russia can jam the signal, but it can't block a drone that doesn't need any signal at all. And just so you have an idea of the technological race behind this, a single Ukrainian company went through 7 different generations of this navigation system in just 3 years. 7 versions. Every time Russia improved the jamming, they redesigned everything. That's the pace of a war where the software rewrites itself every few months. And if you're finding this kind of detail as fascinating as I do something easy to help this channel grow. Subscribe here, because these are the stories we break down every week. But navigation only solves half of the problem. The drone now knows how to manage on its own. But the sky over Russia is still full of missiles waiting for it. Knowing how to get there is not the same as making it there alive. So, how do these drones get through a wall of fire that's made exactly to bring them down, right? And the answer is maybe the most ingenious part of this whole campaign, because Ukraine doesn't try to break through the defense by force. It deceives and exhausts the defense. It works like this. When a swarm of drones takes off toward a Russian city, not all of them carry explosives. In fact, only some of them have warheads. The rest are decoys. They are decoy drones made just to appear on the Russian radar looking like a real threat. And then the trap is sprung. The Russian anti-aircraft teams see dozens of blips on the radar. They panic and start firing their extremely expensive missiles at empty targets. At plastic, each decoy shot down means millions of dollars in missiles wasted for nothing. There's something even worse for Russia. The moment an anti-aircraft battery fires, it reveals its own position. It lights up and shouts, "I'm here!" And the armed drones, the real ones that were coming right behind, now they know exactly where the defense is, and they go straight for it. In other words, the Russian defense, by trying to defend itself, gives itself away. The more it shoots, the more it exposes itself. And all of this is coordinated in a way that drives the Kremlin crazy, because there isn't one big headquarters or a bunker to bomb. The operation is spread throughout the entire country, and it's controlled by ordinary people with laptops. As a Ukrainian intelligence commander said, "Laptops are our biggest advantage, because we're spread out, and that's why it's so hard for Russia to destroy this program." Stop and think about that. cheap software running on an ordinary computer, controlling thousands of drones coming from multiple directions at the same time and overwhelming a radar's ability to process all of that at once. And now we get to the part where everything falls apart for the Russian side. Because destroying a single anti-aircraft battery doesn't just open a small gap. According to the Ukrainian drone units themselves, taking down a single Thor system can open a gap of 50 to 100 kilometers in the defense network. 50 to 100 kilometers of open sky. And through that gap, dozens, sometimes hundreds of drones enter at once in the next wave. It's a cascading effect. Each destroyed defense opens the door for the next wave, which destroys more defenses, which opens more doors. And then Russia runs into a problem. Its size, which has always been the country's greatest advantage, has turned into a curse. There is too much border to defend. Too many refineries, too many depots, too much territory to defend with the missiles they have. A Russian deputy even publicly admitted that the country doesn't have the forces to maintain a continuous shield. And that's why they need to protect only the big cities and critical infrastructure, leaving the rest exposed. Think about the weight of that statement coming from inside Russia itself. They are choosing what to abandon. And even Russian military commentators, those who closely follow the war, have been openly complaining that there is a lack of ammunition to operate the Pantsir, Buk, and Thor systems at the speed the attacks require. That production can't keep up with the consumption. It's the defense admitting through the words of its own supporters that it can't handle it. And the situation is so tight that Russia was seen taking old radars from the 60s out of storage and even pulling radars from the border with Finland, which is a NATO member, just to try to cover the gaps opened by Ukrainian drones. And here, we start to put the pieces of this puzzle together. Look, there are so many drones and they're so cheap that they saturate the radar. They don't depend on satellite signals, so electronic warfare doesn't bite. The decoys make the defense waste expensive missiles for nothing and give themselves away. And every defense that falls opens a gap of dozens of kilometers that Russia has no way to cover. This is the reality we see today. Each layer of the densest defense in the world is saturated, bypassed, or destroyed by something that costs 1,000 times less than it. And this is where we finally answer the question from the beginning, because now it's clear that Russia's problem was never having too little defense. Russia has more air defense than any other country in the world. The problem is that all of it was built for an enemy that no longer exists. It was made to shoot down expensive planes and satellite-guided missiles. And Ukraine simply stopped sending those two things. The Russian shield wasn't pierced by force. It became obsolete. It still stands, gigantic and extremely expensive, defending the sky against a war that's already over. And the final detail, what makes all of this almost impossible to reverse, is the cost. Why? Even if Russia shoots down most of these drones every night, Ukraine can simply make everything again tomorrow. Cheaper than Russia can replace the missiles it used. It's a calculation that Russia loses even when it wins. And here, the story stops being just about Russia. Because what this war has revealed is uncomfortable for any country on the planet. Everything that seemed to protect Russia, the immense size of its territory, the billions spent on cutting-edge military technology, the densest shield ever built, has become exactly the burden it can no longer carry. Strength has become a trap. What used to be an advantage has become the target. And the question that remains, the one that probably every general in the world has already asked themselves, is simple and frightening. If Ukraine, with a fraction of Russia's economy, can do this against the biggest military power in Europe, what's stopping them from doing the same against anyone? How does a country protect its own refineries, its own hydroelectric plants, its own bases, in a world where a few $1,000s worth of plastic and electronics can fly 2,000 kilometers and hit a fuel tank with meter-level precision? Think of any country you consider safe today with its infrastructure spread out, its power plants, its ports, its bases. None of that was made to stop a threat that costs as much as a car and comes from the sky 1,000 kilometers away. The physical border, that line on the map that for centuries meant security, simply stopped protecting. Because, as you can see, this war is rewriting the air defense manual in real time, and every week brings a new chapter to this story. That's what we closely follow here on the channel, so if you haven't subscribed yet, subscribe now so you don't miss what's coming next. I'll end by asking you the same question. In your opinion, does it still make sense to spend billions on cutting-edge defense in a world where a plastic thing costing a few $1,000s can pierce everything? Write down below what you think. Because I read the comments and this is one of the toughest questions in modern warfare. See you in the next video.